In our last update, which was up there last Thursday, I was still higher time frame bearish on Bitcoin. However, we had two support levels that we had to lose in case we wanted to see lower prices. The first one was this one around $95,000, and the second one was less of a support and more of a reference point. However, it was around $93,800. Basically, as you can see, if we came down and lost both of these levels, personally, I did expect much lower prices. Now, if we go over to Bitcoin, as you can see, we did come lower. We lost my first support level first, which didn't offer much of a reaction, as you can see. And then we came back down straight through $93,800. And since then, it has mainly been straight down. So with that said, as usual, before we dive into today's price action and what you can potentially expect next, let me quickly recap what I did. So last week, as I wanted to see the drop into my support, which was once again around $95,000, I was able to catch a very nice short position around $96,500, as you can see on my exchange right there. However, I did decide to fully close it at my support, once again, $95,000. I mentioned it right there. I had fully closed it because at this point, even though I was higher time frame bearish, on the local time frames, we didn't have any sign of weakness yet. However, I did not want to open a long position because we didn't have an imbalance. If I open the chart, as you can see, the support was still holding and we had a 1 hour imbalance at this point, but personally, I was not in a long position yet. After this, price came back down below the local lows, as I personally wanted to see, because again, I was not in a long position. And then we got a very bad close on the 30 minutes chart. Okay, so that was a very bad close below my support. So at this point, of course, I did not want to open a long position. And after that, even though we got a bounce, personally, of course, I still wasn't long. And that's why on Sunday, if I go back over to the chart, even though we had seen a bounce, my plan was to see at least another low back below the initial low that we put in on Friday to drop around $93,800. If I go on the lower time frames, okay, that was my plan, as you can see, to get a drop on Monday and potentially form a Monday low around $93,800. However, unfortunately, I did have a resistance that I wanted to short to see this drop, which was this partially filled imbalance at $95,600. But as you can see, if I hide this plan, this resistance got front shown and we got the drop without me being able to open a short position. $93,800 didn't offer any reaction. And from there, as mentioned in the last YouTube update, right, if we lost this level, I just expected much lower prices. So inside the Discord, when we got the drop, 93.8 getting tested. However, it was too early to look for long positions. So once again, no long position. The next day I woke up, we got much lower prices. And at this point, it was clear that Bitcoin wanted to see much lower prices. So the first target was, I mentioned it right there, the first target was $88,700. Once again, I was able to catch a super nice short position on Monday's highs. As you can see, this is my exchange. This is the entire day. I shorted the exact high. However, I fully closed my short position. Definitely a bit too early when I saw this wick. And I mentioned this inside the Discord. I was in a good short, but I did realize that I had exited a bit early. And since then, why did I open this short, by the way? Very simple as usual. You had two 30-minute imbalances on the breakout. We had the wick. So again, a very easy short position. And that's exactly where I shorted, as you can see. But after that, when I closed my short position, it was just straight down and straight down and straight down until the yearly open. On this day, I was potentially looking for a long position below the daily low. But when we got the drop, of course, we didn't have a reaction at this point. And even though the candle hadn't closed yet, the deviation was too big in my opinion. So once again, no long position. After that, we just continued lower. I did do a bit of a higher time frame update here, where I said that we had two important data points, which will be very important for this update. So just keep this in mind. The first one was that I expected the yearly open to get taken out very easily. If I open the chart, the first major target was the yearly open at $87,500. Even though we could have seen a bit of a bounce first, yes, but the major target was the yearly open. And then the second one was that the end of the month, at least in my opinion, remains an important time pivot. So going back to the chart, we dropped right into the yearly open as expected, and today it is offering a bounce to the upside. Personally, yesterday I wasn't trading just because I took a bit of a break to analyze my performance. Basically, I shorted this high. Okay, so I shorted right there, and I closed my short, sorry, not too early, but I mean, that was a good short and a good close in my opinion, because at this point, we didn't have a sign of weakness yet. However, on Monday, when I opened this short and I closed it right here, and we continued much lower, that's when I had to stop, analyze my performance, and that's why yesterday, once again, I was not on the charts. But in any case, as you can see, the yearly open offered beautiful support, and we are seeing a bounce to the upside. And with all of that said, what can you expect next? So of course, the first thing that we have to say is that, as I just mentioned, okay, the monthly close is an important time pivot. Personally, I would like to see at least a bit of a rally into it. So going back over to the charts, the yearly open has had a support. The close will be, we can call it around next week. Of course, it doesn't have to be on the exact date, but it can be a general area. So right now, as we have seen a bounce from the yearly open, personally, I would like to see higher prices until next week. Okay, can do maybe something like this, come up, come back down, and then continue higher until next week. So right now, what levels do we have? Well, to the downside, definitely we have this 12-hour imbalance. So personally, I would take the open of this candle. Plus, if we go on the 4-hour chart, this looks like the midpoint of this massive 4-hour wick that will get filled, in my opinion, but that's for later. But we have the midpoint of that wick. We have a 12-hour imbalance, and to the downside, we have a wickless daily candle. So this will get taken out as well, in my opinion. So with that said, outlining these factors, we have a wickless candle, we have a massive wick, we have a 12-hour imbalance. We can locally look at two scenarios. Either we rise first, in which case you can look for a fake out above these highs for a day trade short position, not a swing trade, to take it back down to this level. And then at this point, we can get that bigger bounce going into the monthly close, okay? That is one scenario that I'm keeping in mind. We do have a bit of resistance around this area, okay? So you could take this high maybe. It's not too important what the level is, because as soon as you deviate above these highs, you want to be looking for reactions, for imbalances as usual. If you get them, then you can open the short position with a target of $88,700. And of course, at this point, if we get this, personally, I will be interested in the longs around this level. On the other hand, of course, if we drop first, so if we leave these highs alone and we drop first, then this would be even better, because we have all of these highs that will get cleaned up, in my opinion. So again, if you get the drop first and you get a nice reaction, then you can open a long position targeting these highs first. And then after that, of course, we can see what happens. So locally, that's what I would be looking for. Now, on the higher time frames, this is when we can start looking at pretty important levels. One thing that I have been looking at, I should have shared this earlier, but it has been this pitchfork. I did add it right before seeing that high, but you can see that this pitchfork looks extremely strong. One tip, if you don't know a lot about pitchforks, to know if one is good or not, is simply to look at the midpoint. So just like channels. On this one, you can see midpoint, midpoint, midpoint a bit, but again, midpoint, 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 and even on that drop, midpoint, and then lower prices. The high was put in against the high of the pitchfork, and the low was put in right against the low of that pitchfork. So as you can see, this pitchfork is extremely strong and has been respected for a very long time now. So if we are able to rise higher, so let's say we get the lower time frame plan where we take out the highs, come back down, and then go back up, then at this point you could be looking somewhere around the midpoint of that pitchfork. Now in this case, I would look at it as an area just because I'm not really expecting the weekly highs that we put in on Monday that I had shorted. I'm not really expecting these highs to get taken out. And I do realize that if we rise into the end of the month, then the pitchfork might be just above these highs, okay? But just look at this as an area, which will be a very important resistance. Now, the second level of confluence will be the anchored VWAP. So I do want to keep an eye on this. If we add the anchored VWAP from the high, what you will see is that it does come in as confluence with the midpoint of that pitchfork. And finally, if you take the volume profile of this range, we have the value area high right around the midpoint and the anchored VWAP. And I think that if we take the bigger range as well, we also have the value area high around this area. So you can see that this area pretty much around, let's call it 92.5 until $93,000 will be a very big one to hold as resistance. Do we reach it? I am not sure, but personally, if we pump into it, then this one could offer very nice short positions. So to the upside, that would be the big resistance. Here, plus we have partially filled imbalance on the 1 hour. That's a nice confluence. Can remove this. What is this? Now I'm going to keep this, and I'm going to hide the pitchfork, and I'm going to remove this. So to the upside, once again, the massive level, at least in my opinion, will be around $93,000. To the downside, if this level doesn't hold and we push lower, the higher time frame level that we have to hold was the previous support that we had pretty much around the open of this candle at $95,400, 12-hour daily. Okay, so we have a daily order block. You can take this area, can make it a bit smaller because I'm expecting a bit lower. So something like this, this would be your support area on the higher time frames. The 4 hour, the 1 hour, let me check something. So that would be your support. Okay, make it a bit smaller again. Where is it? Where is it? Right there. So to the downside, this would be your support around $85,500. So as you can see, this time I am taking a bit longer to form a plan just because right now this range has been going on for so long that it is getting a bit harder to read price action. Okay, I'm not gonna lie, getting a bit harder to read price action. And that's why personally I have mainly been trading the reactions, combining imbalances with liquidity sweeps as I did on Monday and as I did right there on last Thursday. So with all of this outline, we can do a final recap. To the upside, we have all of these highs that will get taken out in my opinion. To the downside, we have a wickless daily candle that will get taken out, and even lower, we have a very ugly wick that will also get taken out in my opinion. So when you combine all of this, you can start to form a couple of scenarios. But the main ones that I'm personally looking at is that today, ideally, we rise first, take out the highs, then come back down into the support, and then move back up into that resistance around $93,000 as we said. From there, of course, I will be looking for these much bigger reversal to the downside because on the higher time frames, I do remain bearish. However, if we get a drop to the downside, so for example, if we take out the highs and then just continue much lower, then in this case, the massive support that you want to hold will be this one around $95,500. At this point, if you lose the support, in my opinion, we will go straight for this low at $80,000. That's why this support is so important, because you have these two lows. If you sweep below this one, you will sweep that one. And at this point, in my opinion, you will also sweep the first one at $80,000. Okay, so once again, to the upside, we have one big resistance. To the downside, we have one big support. However, locally, as you can see, we have a first support around $88,700. And one final point that you have to keep in mind as we are heading into the end of the month, which will be next week. So I can add this on my chart if you want. As we are heading into towards the end of the month, personally, I will be looking for a rise into this time pivot. And that's why I could see right here price going maybe a bit sideways before coming back up into that resistance. And from there, we will see that reversal to the downside. And at this point, of course, this support level will not be very important anymore because I would expect a break back below $80,000. So with that said, as usual, if you guys enjoyed this update, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.